Welcome to my home. I am very happy to tell you this story. I still don't believe it myself, but back somewhere in the 90s, I think it was the late 90s, it was in the early days when our work in China was wild and woolly and nothing was as you expected. I had been approached by the State Department from the embassy asking for my help in finding out oil prices, and coal prices, that's part of my world, not at all, and I couldn't help them much. But one day I got a call, and there were two embassy personnel in our city dealing with a number of issues, and they called me down to, at that time, the main hotel for foreigners in our city. Was called the Shanxi Grand Hotel. And it wasn't that grand, but you get what you get. And so I went down to the Shanxi Grand and I met these guys, and they asked me again about coal prices and, what's happening in coal in Shanxi. And I go, well, coal is king. I mean, Shanxi, it's all about coal. It's like Eastern Kentucky. It's where they get all the coal for the country of China. But the pricing had been controlled by the government through the 90s and through the late 90s even. And so, I did my thing with these guys, and then they go, "Hey, would you like to meet the guy from the World Bank that's going to divert the Yellow River so that you get water here in Taiyuan that you need in Taiyuan from the Yellow River?" And I go, "What are you talking about? Divert the Yellow River?" I mean, this is like the Mississippi River. This is a massive river. You don't just divert the Yellow River. And he goes, "Oh, no, well, let me introduce you to this guy." So they took me over into the cafe where this guy was sitting, and they made an introduction. "Oh, this is Finn Torgerson working in Taiyuan, and this is Daniel Gunaratnam from the World Bank working with the Yellow River Diversion Project." I said, "Daniel Gunaratnam, nice to meet you. That sounds like an Indian name or Sri Lankan." He goes, "I'm from Sri Lanka, but I grew up in Malaysia." I said, "Well, Daniel, I would love to meet with you and talk with you and hear what you're doing with the Yellow River Diversion Project." He said, "Fine." I said, "Well, can we meet for lunch tomorrow? Could I take you out for lunch tomorrow? This is Saturday night." And he goes, "No, you cannot take me out for lunch tomorrow. I go to church on Sunday." All right, I'm used to dealing with government officials. I'm not used to running into Christian government officials and people of that sort. And so I said, I thought quick, "Daniel, can I translate for you at the Chinese church tomorrow? I'll take you to the local church and I'll translate." So he said, "Yeah, that'll be fine. Pick me up at 9. Really bossy guy, I love you, Daniel, if you're listening to this. So it turned out that we met for service the next morning. I took him to the Chinese local church, about 1,200 people in the church, and we had a nice service. And he did let me take him out for lunch on Sunday, but after church, after we had some service together. Well, it turned out he was running a $1.2 billion diversion project where his job was to take a slew of the Yellow River water and divert it to the city of Datong and the city of Taiyuan and provide drinking water for these major metropolises that needed water. Problem. 2 or 3 problems. But the big problem was they couldn't get data from the Ministry of Water because the Ministry of Water considered all their data state secrets. How much rain falls every year, how much water is collected, how much water is used for irrigation. Somehow in the 90s, this was a state secret. So he said, basically, the World Bank is going to put up $400 million, and the province of Shanxi is going to put up $800 million. That's the $1.2 billion. And if we don't get these state secrets for water in Shanxi, they're not getting the $400 million from the World Bank. So I said, well, let me think. Let me work on some things. So I got to know the Ministry of Water and their people down there, and I started talking with them. And I said, you're doing this report for the World Bank. Do you need any help with the translation on it? And they showed me what they had, and I go, oh, this is terrible. This translation is so bad. It's not professional. It's not high level. One of the problems, Shanxi is a province that's far from the capital, far from the big cities. You don't get the English speakers there that you would in Beijing or Shanghai or the big cities. And so I offered to help them translate their document into better quality. Well, that meant I had the original document with all the original raw data, which is what the World Bank needed. So I did work on the translation, but I slipped the raw data to the World Bank, to Daniel Gunaratnam. And Daniel got it. And then the whole program went through. Whenever I'm in Taiyuan, I'm drinking water from the Yellow River that came through this project. But that's not the end of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. Now, the rest of the story. I didn't get in trouble for passing on the data to the World Bank. They just have a hard time understanding how anybody really wants the real data. To them, it's always you should have good data, the data that makes you feel good. And keep on telling them, no, actually, we want data that records what the real situation is. So then the contract is signed. The World Bank and Shanxi province are going to do this $1.2 billion diversion project that's going to take 3 or 4 years to do. And the money is going to be paid for. But all the top people who should be signing this contract, the World Bank goes, no, we don't care about them. We don't need the governor. We don't need this person. We don't need that person. All we need are the engineers and the scientists that are going to do the project to come to Washington, D.C. and sign the project. So one of the things that we did in Evergreen is we invited the governor, the vice governor of Shanxi, the leaders of the Water Bureau, the political leaders that we had talked to and worked with through this whole process that whole year. We invited them to New York City and to Washington, D.C. to be there for the signing of this project. Well, we had a board member, Carson Muck, who was Chinese, and he was also a structural engineer. And Carson Muck had actually sat in some of the meetings and negotiations with the Chinese officials and the engineers. And Carson Muck hosted them in Washington, D.C. And he took them to church. He took them to the signing of the contract. He took them everywhere. These guys got back from their tour of D.C. and America, and they just couldn't thank Evergreen enough for what we had done for this project. That's 20 years ago. I almost forget about that. But it's little stuff where I was not trained to be a water engineer. I was not trained to deal with government officials. I was not trained or prepared for this kind of work, but God opens doors. And that was a door that opened up for us and probably had more impact in the early years of Evergreen in Shanxi, that we said we would stick our neck out and help them with the Yellow River diversion project. I mean, we're talking about diverting a major river of a country. And like I know anything about that, and yet God blessed. And through that, many people were exposed to issues of faith and to the Evergreen community, and we got to see how God works. Crazy God stories. I love how he does stuff, and it's usually really crazy. So thank you for joining me on this crazy God story.